Today the aim of this video is to explain k-means algorithm to you. So k-means algorithm is a clustering method of vector quantization originally used for signal processing. This is popular for cluster analysis and data mining. K-means clustering aims to partition n observations into k clusters in which each observation belongs to the cluster which is with the nearest mean. Serving as the prototype of a cluster, this results in partitioning of data space into Voronoi cells. So now we will not be going into the details of what Voronoi cells are, but we will be using an example of two wolves, namely Alice and Bob, for explaining this algorithm where meat will be distributed amongst these two wolves. Meet Bob and Alice. They are extremely intelligent white wolves that live on this snowy mountain. Like all wolves, Bob and Alice usually daydream about a big juicy piece of meat. One day, while wandering around the mountain, Alice discovered scattered pieces of meat. Thinking that Bob would like to see this too, she howled for Bob. Hearing Alice's howl, Bob quickly ran towards Alice. Until they stumbled upon scattered pieces of meat. Using their impeccable sense of smell, Bob and Alice noted a total of 10 pieces of meat were spread across their mountain. Since wolves naturally like to mark their territory, they decided that it would be best to split the pieces of meat geographically into two groups, one for Bob and the other for Alice. But how would they form the groups? They both thought for a while and concluded they should use the k-means clustering to form two clusters out of the 10 pieces of scattered meat. Since they communicated their current position via howls, it was easy for them to decide which pieces of meat belong to which cluster. The idea was quite simple. If Bob was closer to the piece of meat, then it went to his cluster. And for Alice, if the piece of meat was closer to Alice, it would go to her cluster. The wolves began by allocating the pieces of meat to their own clusters based on their position. After allocation, we observe Bob had 4 allocated pieces of meat to his cluster and Alice had 6 pieces of meat. Bob and Alice then optimized their solutions by changing their positions using the centroid of their respective clusters. They accomplished this by calculating the mean position of the pieces in their respective clusters. Bob and Alice then moved to their newly calculated positions and communicate their new location via howls. They then proceed to reallocate all pieces of meat to their cluster based on their new position. After moving to the new locations, Bob finds that Alice is now closer to a piece of meat that was in his cluster. So Bob removed that piece of meat from his cluster and lets Alice allocate it to her cluster. Similarly, Alice finds that now Bob is closer to a piece of meat that was in her cluster. So she removes that piece of meat and it is allocated to Bob. They then proceed to calculate towards their centroids of the new clusters. Once again, Alice finds now Bob is closer to a piece of meat which was previously in her cluster. So that gets again allocated to Bob. Again, they proceed and move towards their centroids of their respective newly formed clusters. However, they find that their new positions are only a step away. After taking a step, they observe no change occurs in the meats belonging to their respective clusters. So Alice has 5 pieces of meat and Bob has 5 pieses of meat. Bob and Alice stop applying the K-means algorithm because they know they will end up in the same positions no matter how many times they go on using the algorithm. Now Bob and Alice enjoy the meat that is on the floor. From the video, as we could see, the wolves, Alice and Bob, distributed the meat amongst themselves, and they kept distributing it till they reached a final centroid which never changed. So from this example, I hope you could understand how K-means clustering works and how the pieces of meat are divided amongst Bob and Alice. And yeah, best of luck for your exams or wherever you're going to use this method. Thank you.